CM Punk has called out The Undertaker for a very interesting reason, one of which I would not have guessed he would have done so. And it's actually a very interesting insight from Punk in regards to his view about The Undertaker, because it's not exactly what he said to initiate the conversation, it's where he was going with this conversation. Now, if we look at The Undertaker in recent years, he has completely gotten rid of kayfabe. He is no longer The Undertaker. He is no longer the dead man. Sure, they call him that, but at the end of the day, he is no longer that dark and uh, very supernatural like character. He's not like that. It's Mark Calloway. Look, I had the privilege of interviewing him and Michelle McCool for A&E, and it was an absolute blast. It was really surreal to see The Undertaker and talk with him and interact with him. And you can check that video out on the main channel. But if you look at 2020 after the Boneyard match, even going into the Boneyard match, we started to get elements of The Undertaker. We started to get elements that, well, we hadn't seen before, we haven't seen in a while, where him and AJ Styles leading up to WrestleMania that year, they really started to get a little bit more real, more in depth, and something in which kind of peeled back the curtain just a little bit, and we got to see the real Mark Calloway, right? He even referenced that in this promo. And out of that match came the docu-series about the end of his wrestling career, which was a phenomenal piece, and they did a great job about it. And in that, we got to see The Undertaker in a completely different way. We got to see him open up as a person, as a human being. And since then, he has done various interviews. He even launched his own podcast. Obviously, WWE took that over, but it's a real sense into The Undertaker, into Mark Calloway. And that leads us to today's video, because CM Punk, he did an interview with Sports Illustrated and was asked about the old school approach of staying in character and avoiding media appearances. And he took a sharp joke that had everyone talking about, because he mentioned The Undertaker. Now, this is what he had to say. When asked if he missed about the aura that once surrounded pro wrestlers, especially like someone like The Undertaker, who was famous for protecting his persona for decades, Punk said, "Do I wish I didn't have to do interviews? The Undertaker was just lazy. That's the only reason he did that. He got away with not doing this. That's why he did it. It wasn't because he was really dead. I said it." He said, "Do I wish there was more mystique? It is what you make it. I think I'm a grown man. I still want to protect the business. That's why I'm kind of wildly uneasy about doing this stuff. But I also take it as it comes. So him throwing a little bit of shade at The Undertaker, calling him lazy, do I think it is because The Undertaker is lazy that he didn't want to do interviews? No, I think you cannot have a gimmick like The Undertaker, and especially in the 1990s, even 2000s, you can't have him go out there and do interviews. It just wouldn't make sense. Even when he was doing interviews back in the day, he would appear on the um, on talk shows and stuff like that. He would be in character. He wouldn't do a lot of talking. He would do some, but he wouldn't do a lot of talking. And so I think if you look at it like that, he always tried to protect the character as much as he could, right? He's talked about this in countless interviews where it was, if when he was out in public, he would wear all black and he wouldn't try to talk that often. And Paul Bearer was with him, and Paul would do all the talking, right? And they would try to kind of keep it underground. The Undertaker's talked about in years past where anytime he would make a change to his physical appearance, he would have to get it cleared by Vince McMahon. When he first got his tattoos, Vince McMahon was not happy because it was, how could you do this to The Undertaker without asking me, right? It was very weird, but it was the gimmick. And I strongly believe that no one other than Mark Calloway could have pulled off The Undertaker character. He was just that good, right? All of the nuances, all of the little details that he could do, absolutely top notch. Only he could pull that off. And I think that shows a lot to Mark Calloway of what he was able to do. Part of his success, in my opinion, was keeping the old school mentality. Whether it was the kayfabe, whether it was your owning your craft, whether it was working on your promos, your ideas, your in-ring psychology, making moves matter. I think when we hear you got to make the moves matter when you're trying to tell a story in there, I strongly believe that you need to. I think in today's wrestling, there's too much, and Undertaker's talked about this in the past, but it's like there's too many just do moves just to do moves, just to do moves. We all know the pro wrestling is choreographed, it's predetermined, right? But at the end of the day, it bothers me if you do your finisher and it takes you, 7 times to do it to get the job done. Kind of takes away from that because this is supposed to be a finish, right? This is it. Sure, you can do a kick out every once in a while, but how many times can we see someone kick out of the AA? Or how many, you know what I mean? Like, there's not as many finishes that are protected today as, say, they were back in the day, where you would see a match where a tag team does their finish and they don't even go for the pinfall, right? Like, that one will make you roll your eyes. But the let's talk about the current Undertaker. Let's talk about the current Mark Calloway. What is he doing with WWE? Well, he had his podcast, and that got acquired by WWE. And his co-host, who was actually on Maven's podcast talking about this week, he got replaced by Michelle McCool, which is the Undertaker's wife. And he is doing the podcast, and I thought his former co-host made a good point of like, look, the reason the Undertaker's podcast got over is because not of him interviewing WWE stars. It was because he would have his old buddies on there and they would tell old road stories. And that was the appeal. And I 100% agree. We are getting a more watered down version. But at the time, The Undertaker, he's trying to ramp up his WWE commitments, right? He's on WWE LFG. He is taking an active role in the AAA promotion that they acquired. He is starting to do more media. He has his one-man shows. I mean, this man is still he signed a couple years ago. I think it was 2019. He signed like a 20-year deal. They don't want him going nowhere. Now he's made his money. He don't need his money, but they're keeping him going, and it's good. It gets him active, gets him out and about. It's good for his mentality, and also it helps WWE because when you have the Undertaker go out there and promote your product or get your product over or whatever, it's a good thing, and you got to keep going with it. So I'm curious to see what WWE has further in store for the Undertaker. I'm interested in seeing what he does, what he doesn't do. Right? What will he turn down? What will he not turn down? So it'll be a lot of interesting and a lot of fun.